Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Jenny Aiello, and this is With Love, Jenny, a podcast where we meet ourselves right in the heart of our vulnerability and authenticity. In this sacred space where it's just you and I dive into real life, rich with wisdom and opportunities for deep healing. I explore what it means to truly connect to ourselves, to each other, and to something much greater than us all. In each podcast, I like to meet life right where it touches us most, in our tenderness, in our truth, in our struggles and our strength. So wherever you are on your journey, or whatever it is that you're carrying, no matter how light or heavy, just know I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin today's episode. Hi there, and welcome. This one is a doozy for me, and recording it is actually part of my own healing. Even though this happened, almost 30 years ago for me. Suicide's a tough topic. I am going to dive into all the different facets that I experienced from all kind of different angles, and we're going to talk through that and hope it brings you some insights or broadens your thought process around a pretty difficult subject that society has yet to learn how to discuss. And that's something that we need to talk a lot about, and you'll see why. I'm approaching this from the aspect of how I found my way through this unique grief and through the lens of both personal experience and then that of a spiritual view that led me to my own healing around it. And just to be completely transparent, I'm not sure my healing is complete, and I'm not sure it ever is. That's something that's still to be determined, I guess. Also, if you haven't listened to my interview with Dawn Lohr, I believe she was episodes 25, 26, and 27. It was called A Mother's Resilient Heart. You might want to listen to Dawn's story as well. It was very riveting and very moving and very raw and very inspiring in her courage and her strength. So she tells a very different version of her experience as a mother. And today I'm going to be sharing my story. And just for transparency, because this is a difficult topic for me because it's so deeply personal. And yes, it made one of the top 10 hardest things that I ever went through. I basically had to kind of write it. So I'm going to be using that as a guide to keep me focused. Okay. So thanks for hanging with me. And really and truly, thank you for being here. Even if you haven't experienced something like this, we might know someone who has, and we want to learn things not to do and things that do help, right? So it's a way that we as a community can come together. All right, so here we go. I remember this particular morning, like it was yesterday. It was a spring day. I had just dropped the kids off at school, and I was running by Kinko's to make copies to give to people stopping by a little bit later for a meeting that we were having at my house. And on the way home from doing that, the song on the radio caught my attention. I'm going to tell you the lyrics, and you'll be able to sing along. I will spare you not singing. They went, "I can see clearly now. The rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's going to be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. I think I can make it now. The pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is the rainbow I've been praying for. It's going to be a bright, bright, sunshiny day." The words to that song felt written in bold letters. I didn't yet know why. It was a song I always heard my brother sing with his beautiful, clear voice. So, of course, I thought of Andy. Then I thought, he didn't call me this morning. That's really odd. Like clockwork, my phone rang every Tuesday morning at 7:30 and would talk and talk until I could finish getting my kids fed and ready for school. And I would plan to call him later that morning once I finished up with that meeting that I was going home to. So my friends came over for this meeting. My daughter, Allie, was there too. I was homeschooling her, so she was home. And I kept thinking, it is such a beautiful day. And then the phone rang. I answered, and it was my oldest brother. In times of stress, he isn't known for his softness or his gentleness, and I could tell he was stressed. Still, compassionately, he asked if I was sitting down, and I said, no, why? And he told me, I need you to sit down. He asked if I was by myself, and again, I said, no, why? And he told me, please sit down. So I sat down, not knowing what was happening, but getting a strong feeling that something was terribly wrong. My immediate thought was that one of our parents had died. So I asked him before he had time to say anything, are mom and dad okay? He was quiet for what felt like an eternity. It's Andy. He shot himself. The words reverberated in my head as I was trying to comprehend what I was hearing. Wait, what? Andy did what? He shot himself. And I said, well, is he okay? And it wasn't like Andy was a hunter and I didn't even know that he owned a gun. And my older brother had to tell me again. And he said, Jenny, Andy's gone. I had so many questions and he had so many more calls to make. So I said, one last question. Do mom and dad know yet? No, not yet. And I said, is there any way, just please don't tell them? They don't have to know. Just don't tell them. I didn't want them to ever experience such a loss. We hung up, and I had to tell my 13-year-old daughter, who adored her uncle so much, that he was gone and why. I could barely breathe to see her grief mixed in with my own, and my thoughts raced. How? Why? I was just with him. I had just spent a long weekend with all 5 kids in his house, having fun and laughing and telling jokes and pulling pranks and doing all the things we love to do together. There was no sign at all. Was there? Did I miss it? One question after another flooded my mind. And then logistics. The logistics relieved me from feeling for the next few hours. I had to get to my parents. I did get to know that my other brother was with them on a business trip. He happened to be in town, and telling them was his job now, and he would get to do that in person. To this day, I'm so grateful to him. I had to arrange pickup for my other kids from school. Our neighbor went and brought them home. My dear friend who was with me became my guide. And I called my husband, who rushed home from work, and we booked a flight to Florida. I packed a suitcase and included a dress for the funeral. Denial again. A funeral? Wait, what? Is this really happening? After we get the news of someone's suicide, we do seem to find ourselves standing in a wide, silent sanctuary where screams and sobs and disbelief echo back and forth. As the news settled into my bones, I fell to my knees and I asked God, please let us turn back time just a few hours. Please, please let us undo this terrible tragedy. It is in this desperation that I turn to statistics right now for all of you to hear. They surprised me. So let me share what I've gotten. And I did some research on this, and it's not equally consistent in some aspects, but it still warrants quoting these statistics because they are consistent in the categories. Just sometimes the statistic itself was missing consistency. So don't quote me on them, but I want to tell you this because it is shocking. In 2022, the highest suicide rates were not among teenagers or young adults, but among our elders. This resource says that 1 in every 4,300 lives were lost to suicide in those 85 years and older, and 1 in every 5,000 people ages 75 to 84 also took their life. These figures startle us partly because we rarely picture our grandfathers, grandmothers, great aunts, longtime neighbors in the same risk-filled light that we cast on the youth. Yet the statistics whisper of loneliness after a spouse passes, of bodies that no longer do what we want them to, and of cultures that prize productivity over the wisdom years. Spiritually, this summons us to remember that every season of life deserves community. The circle must widen to include those who once carried us. I can say that taking all of our parents through end of life was met with hard decisions. And it's an upcoming episode that I'll go into it with more detail. But my mom said it beautifully. The golden years aren't so golden. I was grateful that we were able to talk to them every day, surround them with love, let them know that they were loved, never missing a day of visiting, talking, and seeing them when we could. But let's go back to these statistics. At the other end of life's arc, adolescents and young adults, ages 15 to 24, died by suicide at a rate of 1 out of every 7,300. Suicide remains the second leading cause of death for children 10 to 14 and adults 25 to 34. Even in an era of hyperconnection through our cell phones and computers, many young hearts feel unseen in their most tender passages of becoming. The sole task of that stage is to discover identity, and when that search collides with relentless comparison, cyber noise, or bullying, the burden can feel unlivable. Our work then is to become trustworthy mirrors, adults who reflect the inherent worth of emerging souls before they try to measure it themselves. So if you are a parent of those ages of children, be present, be engaged, be involved. And if you are the child of older parents, be present, be engaged, be involved. To the degree that you can, it matters. My brother landed somewhere in the middle of all that. He didn't fit in any of those categories. So obviously, it happens to anyone at any point in time. But placing these two ends of the spectrum side by side, it reveals a sacred through line that every human being, from the first sparks of independence to the final embers of an earthly life, longs to know, I still belong. I still belong here. Spiritually, at its core, is the recognition of that belonging to God, to Source, to one another, to the great unfolding story. They have to know they belong somewhere to something, whatever they will believe in. So the hope is that we understand it is less about rescue and more about presence. We need to get out and visit the widower who talks mostly of the past. We need to visit our grandparents and older relatives, invite their stories into the present moment, even if they repeat them each time. We need to be texting the teenagers and mentoring them, especially if their silence feels ominous. Offer your listening before your advice. Put down your phone and genuinely talk to your family, a friend, a stranger. Every gesture says, "You matter right now." That phrase, anchored in love, can interrupt the echo chamber of despair long enough for someone to consider professional help and a deeper healing. And when we become willing witnesses to one another's pain, we practice what every faith tradition ultimately teaches. Love is the breath that keeps the flame of hope alive, one soul at a time. Now let's move in to another ache, and it's the ache of guilt. We often, after a suicide, replay every phone call, every text, every coffee date, every visit, every prayer, as if we're prosecuting our own hearts. I was there. I checked in. Why didn't it change anything? This anguish, some call survivor guilt, and it grows from a sacred but misplaced conviction that love should always rescue. If we do enough, if we are enough, they wouldn't have made that choice. Yet every wisdom path insists on the mystery of free will. Each soul carries choices even the deepest devotion cannot override. Recognizing that boundary is not abandoning them. It is honest humility before the autonomy of another human spirit. Your presence in their life mattered. My presence in my brother's life mattered. All the people who loved my brother, all the people who loved the person you lost mattered. Every smile, every midnight text, it all mattered. But influence is different from control. This is tough for me because I am a control freak. We can offer warmth, perspective. We can offer professional resources. We cannot dictate another's internal weather. This distinction is painful, and it releases the crushing illusion that you were the final gatekeeper between life and death. In spiritual terms, you walked your brother or your friend or your son or your daughter or your partner as far as their path allowed you. The next steps were between their soul and the infinite or God. So remember, the measure of your worth was not the outcome of someone else's battle. It never is. Your willingness to stand in both tenderness and uncertainty is itself a sacred gift, and one that continues to ripple outward even all these years later. And now, how do you take care of yourself in this firestorm of grief? So let's talk about that. Grief also lives quite well inside the body. So give it a language. Let it have a voice that goes beyond thought. Less than 5 years after my friend lost her son, she and her husband both faced health issues. And she said to me, Jenny, grief is hard on the body. Grief is hard on the body. And I thought, yes, it is, which is why it is imperative to know all the ways that you can take care of yourself, understanding that holding grief longer than your heart can carry it without being able to transmute it will lead to a health crisis at some point because our bodies keep the score. So what do you do? I can tell you some of the ways that I did it. I gathered photos and I made memory albums of my brother to give to all of us, all of my siblings. You can write a letter and you can write down every single regret that you might have or that you're carrying and then release it to the fire, letting smoke carry the weight back to God. You can light a candle on their birthday or the day that they left, whispering, I loved you fiercely and your choice was never mine to control. And keep that perspective. Rituals like these carve safe channels for sorrow to move and breathe. And they remind the nervous system that it too has room to move and breathe. Little do we know how these kinds of traumas impact us physically. And our nervous system is the first place that takes the hit. Even the strongest faith benefits from companionship on this road. So trauma-informed therapy or coaching, joining a suicide loss group, somatic work, trusted spiritual guides, all provide mirrors that say your pain is evidence of love, not of failure. And over time, the question can soften. Instead of saying, why wasn't I enough? Why weren't all of us enough? It becomes, how can I honor their memory through the way I live and love today? That shift doesn't fix the ache, but it threads meaning through the jagged edges, allowing the heart to stay open Tender, yes, but still beating its steady promise. Love endures, even here. A way to transmute guilt. Guilt often loops through if only I had stories. So instead of silencing those thoughts, maybe meet them with a compassionate inquiry. Is this memory proof that I failed or proof that I cared deeply? Am I searching for certainty in a realm governed by mystery? What would I say to a friend who offered the same devotion I did? Obviously, you're going to hear me say it all the time in every call, I think, but journaling or speaking these questions aloud will begin to transmute self-blame into self-witnessing, a shift from fault-finding to telling the truth. Now, let's talk about faith. For me, this was hard. What beliefs were taught to us about suicide? What does your faith say? What question rose up with regard to their soul? In the hush that follows a suicide, religion often arrives with both balm and barbed wire. In some parts of Christianity, they teach that life is sacred, fearfully and wonderfully made, and many traditions read the sixth commandment of thou shalt not kill as including the self. Some branches, especially older Catholic teaching, once labeled suicide a mortal sin, suggesting a slammed shut door between the soul and eternity. Other communities now speak quickly of grace, insisting God's compassion runs deeper than any final desperate act. But when doctrine collides with grief, the tidy lines blur. I still remember the sting of my pastor's words in the days after my brother died. How a single comment about eternal consequences and not ever seeing him again tangled itself around my raw heart. I had shown up looking for guidance and comfort and instead was handed a riddle. Was my brother beyond mercy? That question cracked open like a private wrestling match with my own faith. If God is love, where was love when the darkness closed in on someone I adored? Did divine presence step aside, or did our theology simply lack the vocabulary for a pain that fierce? In the quiet hours, I wrestled with what I was taught and what I knew to be true, but couldn't really say why. If God could sit beside the prophets and the poets and even Christ himself in their darkest valleys, perhaps God was nearer to my brother than any of us dared imagine. Closer than doctrine, and closer than breath itself. So I have come to hold two truths in trembling hands. First, that every life is immeasurably precious, and we are called to protect it. Second, that when a mind is overwhelmed by torment and pain and suffering, judgment gives way to mystery, and mercy gets the last word. I do not pretend to know exactly how grace moves beyond the veil, but I trust the character of a love that will not break a bruised reed. That trust allows me to ask hard questions without losing the thread of hope. Where was God? Where was God in his final hour? And I believe he was right there in Andy's pain, in his heartache, catching every tear that we couldn't. Yes, life is sacred. Yes, suicide is grave, but responsibility can be clouded by unbearable suffering, and mercy is never barred from entering a soul's final breath. Sitting with that line felt like finding a candle still burning in a sanctuary I thought was dark. It did not answer every why, but it loosened the knot of fear that my brother's last act had erased a lifetime of tenderness and joy and laughter. I began to understand grace less as a courtroom verdict and more as oxygen, the very atmosphere of God permeating places that doctrine just can't chart. So, where was God? Perhaps in the same place divine love has always been, in the fractured psyche, weeping with him, in the frantic phone calls we made, breathing through us, and even now in the ache we carry forward, inviting us to become softer and wiser companions to others who stumble near that edge. My wrestling, it hasn't ended, but it has changed shape. I've gone from is suicide the unforgivable sin to how large is the circle of love that refuses to quit on any human story here or in the afterlife. That reframing let me keep the holiness of life intact and admit the complexity of mental and emotional health. It invites lament, the honest, ancient prayer of wounded hearts, alongside clinical help and community vigilance. Most of all, it asks me to trust that the one who knit each life together is gentle enough to hold its unraveling and faithful enough to weave threads of meaning from even this torn place. When a suicide shatters our circle, the first echo is often, how could they? Yet that cry is not so different from the bewilderment we feel when someone gossips or betrays or meets our vulnerability with indifference. In each case, a mind is reacting to pain it can't quite hold. And the reaction, whether a lethal act inward or a wounding act outward, springs from the same root, unbearable inner tension seeking release. Clinical research calls one strand of that tension cognitive constriction, a tunnel vision state where options shrink until death seems like the last doorway left. Studies show that under chronic stress, cognitive inflexibility sharply heightens suicidal ideation in both adolescents and adults, confirming what survivors sense intuitively. Despair narrows the psyche until it mistakes a single tragic answer for relief. Another thread is moral injury, the psychic wound that opens when our deepest values are violated, often by others and sometimes by ourselves. Betrayal and shame, abandonment, judgment, ridicule, bullying, or the feeling that we failed those who depended on us, it can drive the same circuitry of hopelessness that precedes suicide. Recent work links betrayal-related moral injury to rising depression and self-destructive thoughts. When we look through that lens, everyday harms, everyday things that we do, when we talk about people behind their back, when we lie or tell insensitive, teasing, and calloused jokes, they're miniature moral injuries that we inflict when our own heart leaks sideways. They don't make headlines, but they erode the shared field of safety in which a human heart is meant to breathe. The question then shifts from how could they to what private torment, fear, loneliness, unmet grief made this seem like the only choice. It's recognizing that our words carry energy. We either uplift or we tear down. We either love or we show up in the absence of love. Our walls, when we don't speak, when we see a father turn away from a son when he could just sit down and talk it out, when we see estrangement in any family, when we are insensitive to what that person is going through and we demean or tease or criticize, whether meant in jest or minimalized, it all adds up, you guys. Not everyone can shed those quiet jabs. Some people so easily toss out. So let's start being mindful of that. It doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter the gender. It doesn't matter at all. Where is our humanity? We have to show up as a community. We have to show up as a family. We have to heal our relationships. We have to try to meet those we love where they are and at least say, you still belong here. Spiritual traditions name this side I'm talking about our shadow. The parts of us, when left unacknowledged, act out in ways that contradict our professed love. Bringing the shadow into light isn't permission for harm. It's a call to radical accountability and compassion, first toward ourselves, so we don't bleed on others, and then toward those whose wounds spill onto us. In that wider view, the task is less about judging another's breaking point and more about tending the invisible fractures that live in every human story before they deepen into choices we cannot unmake. It has been almost 30 years since that morning, and I still think about that song I heard on the radio. Was that Andy telling me he was free? The dark clouds are gone and he's okay now. I think I can make it now. The pain is gone and all the bad feelings have disappeared. Was he giving me that song, knowing that in just a matter of time, I would be hurting so badly, and he wanted those words to bring comfort? I believe it was. Well, by afternoon, I was on a plane to get to my parents in Florida as fast as I could. My brother, who had told them, had to fly back to Connecticut and make arrangements for us all to meet for the funeral. The next day, I would drive them the 11-hour drive from where they lived in Florida to where Andy lived, and we would gather as a family in disbelief and in shock and in deep sorrow. I would make a series of difficult decisions. Did I want to see him one more time? Because they made that possible. Did I want to speak at his funeral? I answered yes to both. I did need to see him because otherwise I would live in denial as long as I possibly could. And I will tell you, it was surreal. It was incredibly hard. A couple days later, at 4 a.m., I sat huddled in the bathroom of our hotel room, hoping not to wake my sleeping family. I wrote my thoughts on little square napkins that came with the coffee station in our room, numbering them so I knew how to go in order, as this would be the best it got for me to do my talk at the funeral, my eulogy. Those notes became a foundation for me, and I focused on his beautiful life, not his tragic death. I reminded all of us how much he made us laugh. I retold some of his all-time favorite jokes that preyed on anyone's gullibility and made them laugh. I learned that the smallest thing, like his favorite cereal, Sugar Smacks, could keep his spirit alive in our hearts and in our homes indefinitely, generation after generation. I wanted all of us to remember his heart, his kindness, and his pain. No sugarcoating what happened. And the call to look inward, not with shame or guilt, but a level of accepting responsibility for our choices, not his, so that we are more aware of our words and our actions. We are more present to the people we love. We never know what state of mind someone is in, and to remember we have the ability to influence others' decisions, but not control outcomes. In the months following his death, my life was not the same. I tried to navigate this big, painful hole that was left behind while still trying to be attentive to my 5 precious children who were also trying to understand what happened and navigate the first big grief they had to experience. I was attentive for my parents who suffered the unthinkable, for his daughters, his wife, my other brothers, his nieces, his nephews, who all loved him so much, all of our extended family, our great big circle of friends, his partner in his practice, his friend. We all lost someone special that day. My heart held the enormity of our collective grief for a very long time until it was time to let it go. And that is a timeline that we cannot predict or choose, just allow, because grief takes time. I will tell you that our family has never fully healed from that loss. We all still suffer. Perhaps we all became reminders that were too painful to feel again. Because here we sit 2 decades later, and I found myself sitting next to my dad when he was dying, and I asked him if there was anything unsettled here in his life. He too was wrestling with his faith. Would he see his son again on the other side? We talked about it, and I shared my belief that absolutely yes, that he would, and I told him why I believed that he would. It seemed to bring him peace, and I do hope that was true, and I sit daily in that same mystery. Today, I talk to my brother all the time. Sometimes I can still hear his voice, and definitely I receive his wisdom. I can hear him singing when certain songs show up on a playlist, and I also still see him as 44 years old, which makes no sense because I'm well past that age, and he was my older brother. I wonder what he would look like if he were still here. Would his voice still sound the same? Would he still make us all laugh until we had no breath? Would he still take me fly fishing, even though I never really got the hang of it? Would he still call me every Tuesday morning? Time warps. It bends. Nothing about grief follows a linear timeline. I found that when I looked at suicide through this lens of a spiritual journey, of a soul that came here to learn and to grow just the same as me, I found peace. And I hope that you do too. May your heart find its slow, steady breath in the hush of your own sacred practice, whether that is a candlelit prayer, silent walks beneath the trees, or simply pausing each dawn with a hand on your chest and a whisper of love and kindness to your hurting heart. In that quiet, let every tear and unanswered question become an offering to a love that is wider than doctrine and tender enough to hold mystery. Trust that the one you lost reached for the only doorway they could when pain eclipsed all other light, and that the same mercy that now enfolds them also surrounds you. As you lean into the truths that resonate, grace beyond rules, belonging that cannot be severed, may acceptance rise like the dawn, not erasing sorrow, but softening its edges until you can carry their memory with more tenderness than ache and walk forward as living proof that even in the shadow of their goodbye, love endures. My brother lives in all of us. Each time I start the engine of his now very old pickup truck, stories are still told. Memories are still revisited, and laughter, well, he's still making all of us laugh. I love you, Andy. Keep watching over us. Okay, I made it through that part. I hope today's episode widened your view on this difficult topic, covering it from all aspects to where do you wrestle with your faith? Are you carrying guilt? What are you doing with feelings of insignificance or not enoughness? I hope it deepened your compassion for the person you lost and the person you are right now. I hope it deepened your compassion toward the people in your life who might be fighting a battle that you know nothing about. I hope it brought peace to your heart, and I hope you felt seen and understood in just some part of what I shared through my story. I do want to say that if anything I shared activated trauma or brought up too much for you, please reach out for professional help. That is how we take care of our mental health when pain is looking for light. I am more than happy to talk to you about coaching. If you want to know more, I walk people through their grief journeys all the time in much the same way I walked through my own. My hope is that you too come to terms with what happened and find yourself wrapped in grace. So please reach out, get help, and I'm here and happy to share more about how I might be able to walk that journey with you. And as promised, I've included a meditation with this episode that focuses on healing from suicide. You are welcome to go to the show notes and click the link that will take you to where you can download it. It is my gift to you. And this is my whispered prayer for you as we close. May you feel the hush of peace settling like dawn upon your heart. May you remember the love you shared, bright and unbroken by goodbye. May you release the stories of guilt and let the river of grace carry them away. May you honor their memory through every tender, purposeful breath you take. May you find in the wide silence of spirit the unshakable truth that you both still belong to love. Thank you for listening and for sharing this podcast with anyone who might need to hear it. This topic is so important for us to all learn more about. We have to open up the dialogue around mental health, the dialogue around grief and suicide, and other unnatural ways that we lose people we love. So let's make sure we take better care of each other, always, and with love. Take care. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you found a spark of wisdom to carry with you, and maybe even a deeper invitation to heal and grow and transform through your own beautiful story. Or maybe this episode made you think of someone who could use encouragement. And if so, I hope you will share it with them. If you'd like to learn more about working with me or attending one of my healing retreats, coaching programs, and other offerings, you can visit my website at jennyaiello.com or email me directly at jenny@jaiello.com. You'll find all the links in the show notes. If today's episode touched you, it would mean the world if you would leave a review or share it with someone who might need it, or just reach out and let me know how it landed for you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm building something special here. Real stories, real life, real connection. One episode, one heart, and one story at a time. As always, with love. Oh, and this is the legal message, but mostly a message from my heart. And I just need to share this with you right now. Please know this podcast is offered solely for educational and entertainment purposes. If you find yourself triggered due to anything that was shared in this podcast, please seek professional help. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for mental health services. While I am a professional life coach, I am not a psychotherapist, nor am I a mental health clinician. So if you are struggling emotionally, please seek help, because you matter, you are important, and most of all, you are worthy of doing this work, the work that leads you to a better and healthier place. Okay? All right. Thank you. And please always make enough time to take care of yourself, and do so with love.